Well, here we are again. You'll see winter is definitely here because I'm not only not wearing distasteful shorts, I've also got a hoodie on. I'm also got a change of mug because we were sent a very nice selection of mugs by a kind chap called James Hinton, so thank you very much for those. Right, we're starting in the engine room. This is the 2JZ for the Mark II Jaguar project, Project Utah. So if you watched these before, we actually managed to get a complete new short engine, so crank, rods, pistons, assembly pre-built into the block. And now we're just in the early stages. We managed to get a new one of those from Toyota, and we're in the early stages of the rest of the build now. So we've got the oil pump on there, water pump, just getting the sump and pickup pipe on there. It's worth noting the oil pump was one of the things we've changed from standard. This is going to be a naturally aspirated engine, and it was originally. It was the Lexus spec. Now the super turbo oil pump is actually a direct fit, and we did that primarily because it has a crank sensor mounting, and the matching cam belt pulley has the toothed wheel on it for the crank sensor. Now, because we're going to be running an aftermarket management system, running a wasted spark coil pack rather than a traditional distributor, we needed that, and it was just a really convenient way of doing it. So that's in build at the moment. I would guess next time we do one of these, that's going to have progressed a fair bit from where it is. So let's have a little wander through and see what else we've been up to. It's actually been a pretty hectic few days. We've got two new projects which have arrived because the Cortina's obviously left us and created some space, and we've got another car leaving shortly as well. So we've had two new arrivals, one of which I'm going to leave till next time before we do the big reveal. One of which is this yellow Chevette down here, but I will briefly just dwell on this, which is a project we completed, I think it was about a year ago. And it's actually the sister car to Kaiser II, so this is Kaiser I. And they're both obviously classic Mercedes. This is a W108 saloon, Kaiser II is a W111 coupe. But the overall theme in terms of mechanicals is the same on both. They're both running crate Chevrolet LS3 engines, the GM 4L65E transmission, which is their kind of go-to automatic transmission. And they're both running Jaguar X300 axles, both ends. The similarities pretty much end there though, because the sort of theme in terms of the look and the interior and the exterior appearance is very different. Kaiser II is obviously a nice metallic blue and very light and airy feeling, whereas this is, you'd probably say gangster looking would be a good term for it. Black throughout. Huge amount of custom work on the interior on this one, because on the later cars they just weren't quite so nicely designed originally. The earlier cars, like the 111 up there, it's just got a much nicer classic look about everything. You know, the dash has got this beautiful curve to it. There's lots of solid brass parts that are chrome plated. Even the seats are more attractive originally, and they started to introduce a lot more plastic parts on these, so we ended up basically redesigning the whole interior. All of the bits that are wood in there are actually aluminium parts that we've handmade and then had hydrographically printed with the wood grain. All of the panels, like the dash top, the lower dash, all of the door card panels have been remade in more modern materials. So, I mean, aluminium in terms of the dash, the door top rolls are aluminium, the door main panels are plastic, because all of the original parts are kind of made in this sort of fibre board. The curved parts are almost like cardboard, compressed cardboard, and the main flat panels are basically like a hardboardy wood type material. And over time they all just warp and fall apart, and you got to the point where so little of it was usable, we just ended up remaking everything. And there's a lot of custom designed parts in there, so it was a build we were really, really proud of. Stepping to the opposite end of the spectrum, the humble Vauxhall Chevette. We've obviously built one of these before, as you saw in last week's episode. We were looking at the rally car that we built, which was actually the inspiration for this customer to book this project in. So what he wants is a sort of road orientated version of that car. So it's going to be the wide arched HSR body kit that they use on the rally cars. In fact, it's the extra wide kit where the rear arches are even wider. It's going to have a similar spec Vauxhall C20XE engine, which will do to virtually the same spec as the other one, so it should make around 280, 290 horsepower. Quaife 6-speed sequential gearbox. That's going to be mated up to an Atlas fully floating axle, which is kind of the go-to setup for a Mark II Escort rally car. And it's just because everything is so easily available for Escort in the rallying scene, it makes sense to transfer a lot of that over to the builds like this, like a Chevette. So we'll have the Atlas axle in there. We're going to have alloy front hubs, which are made to the Ford PCD. So it'll be Ford PCD all the way around, so 4x108 PCD. And then we're just going to do, you know, a great suite of electronics on it. So it's going to have a Motec digital dash, Motec engine ECU, Motec PDU, which manages all the electrical systems on the car. Relatively stripped out, not as hardcore as the rally car that we built. It's going to have a cage, but slightly less intrusive cage. It's going to have some degree of interior, so we'll probably have a headlining in it and some carpet to just try and keep the noise down a little bit in there. But it's kind of that sort of rally car for road use as a toy, basically, for the guy we're building it for. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing this come together, because these kind of stripped back motorsport builds are such a kind of contrast to the complicated builds like the Mercedes projects. And it's just a totally different set of challenges and rewarding in a different way. You know, you can get in this at the end of it and just, you know, feel like an absolute lunatic hooning down the country lanes in it. Whereas, you know, the Mercedes projects are just fantastic projects to just waft along in. So they're totally opposite ends of the spectrum, and projects that we're equally enthused about. So really looking forward to getting this moving. Next week we should be blasting this, stripping the rest of the parts off it, blasting it, and then we'll be able to make a start on the metalwork. So let's have a little walk this way. A lot of my work over the last week or two has actually been ordering parts for that Chevette project, because when we do the metalwork, there's obviously going to be an amount of rust repair, but then we're fairly quickly going to be into the dry build stage on it, where we're going to need the engine ancillaries, the gearbox, the axle, and even to the extent of needing quite a lot of electrical parts and components like that, where we'll be planning out where they're going to be mounted. So it's important to get a lot of that hardware ordered now. So moving on, the Morris. We were looking at, I think that was mainly looking at the exterior bodywork that we were modelling last week, but now we've moved on to doing the interior and the changes to the dash specifically. So there's always been a proposed change to the dash, and now we've been actually putting that into place. The main reasons for this are we're having aircon on this car, so there's a vintage air heater and aircon unit back here. We've used these on quite a lot of projects, and they're a great solution. They just give you quite a modern experience in terms of the climate control. So you've got servo-controlled air direction change between demist, face vents and foot vents, servo-controlled temperature control, so the dials are just a nice little potentiometer and they feel really nice to use. So we've got one of those in there, and obviously because of the size of the unit, although it's extremely compact for heating and aircon unit with all of that functionality, it still needs some extension of the dash to cover that. And we also wanted to extend the dash down so that the column was coming through the dash and not hanging down below it. We also wanted somewhere to put some air vents, because originally on these you have the demist vents, but you don't actually have a directional air vent for your face. And we wanted somewhere to put the stereo. Now, the owner of this wants a CD player, which actually in this day and age is quite a rarity. But he wants a CD player, which means you need a reasonable space to put a traditional CD player in there. So kind of combining all those elements together, we came up with this nice shape, which Stu's made in steel. It rolls up slightly at the ends to sort of echo the original shape of the dash there. Nice radius under here, which rolls all the way around. And when we're finished with this, the plan to try and break it up a bit visually is that the top part of the dash, the original bit, will be painted body coloured, and then the lower part will be upholstered in leather. And that will allow us some details as well. So we'll have a French seam that runs around this corner here all the way around. And I think once that's all come together, it's going to look really good. We're going to delete some of these switch holes here will all go, and there'll be a console built down here around the gear shifter that's going to have most of the switch gear, which is actually not a lot because there's so much on the column that we're using. The additional switch gear is going to be electric windows, the climate control controls, which will also be down here, and not a lot else, to be honest. We may put a start button here, I think, and then we're going to have a speedo traditional instrument that sits in here, which is speedo but also a rev counter, and we'll have the additional information like engine temperature and oil pressure built into that. The vents are Mercedes SLK vents, which we've used before. In fact, they're on Kaiser I. They're just a really attractive vent and got a nice motion where you rotate this to open and close the vent, and obviously you can aim it by moving it around. So that's looking really good. I think the other areas we've been progressing with is actually hiding now behind there, but the Chevette rally car, we've been doing the anti-roll bar installation, which Nat's been working on this week. He talked about the plan with that last week, I think, and that was basically to introduce a rear anti-roll bar and at both ends give it adjustable anti-roll bars. And that's almost done now. The owner will be taking that back tomorrow. The Mustang is at the point where we're pretty much ready to get it off the jig, roll it over, finish the underside welding, and then it's going to be ready for blasting then, which we will try and time to group in with the Chevette. So we'll strip the Chevette down next week, hopefully get the welding done on the underside of that, and then try and juggle the two so that the timing coincides to blast them in sequence, which we will try and show on the video. Utah, the Mark II Jag, is perilously close to final paint now. Gaz is just doing the final wet sand on the epoxy primer on the shell. The panels are all ready to go. So I think, I don't want to tempt fate here, but I think in a week's time it will be painted. So that's something really exciting to look forward to. So a lot going on, and there is another project arrival which we're all incredibly excited about, but we will let you know what that is next week. See you then, bye.